Hello and welcome to the School Safety Free Period podcast. I'm Amanda Klinger,
And I'm Dr. Amy Klinger.
and we're with the Educators School Safety Network. We're a national nonprofit and we provide school safety training and consulting and technical assistance and professional development. And then every once in a while, hopefully once a week, we have a slightly less academic, slightly less structured conversation. And it's the School Safety Free Period, where we talk about what's on our mind related to school safety. So, what do you have for us today?
Well, I thought today we would try to make everybody mad by
Nice.
bringing,
Okay, that's good. School safety riot. Love it. Let's see what we got.
I thought we would try to make everyone angry by bringing up something that I found to be very interesting when we were out in the school recently and had a discussion with their leadership team.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that the school had been really focusing on, which I found really fascinating, was they had been looking at much more of the student experience in their classrooms,
Okay.
specifically talking about how we inadvertently, and this is the part that will first make everybody mad, and then hopefully everybody go, well, you know what? Of how classrooms are inadvertently set up as like little kingdoms for the teacher. So this is the part where everybody's going, no. So just think just for a second. And what they did was they had their teachers calculate to a certain extent. I don't know how accurately or how in depth they went, calculate the use of the space. So if your classroom is, however many square feet, what percentage of the classroom was for the adult in the room, the teacher, in my classroom, and what percentage of the space was for the direct use of students. And that really got me thinking about all the field work that we do. And when we go into classrooms, how there are some classrooms where that percentage is very skewed. And that the room is clearly my classroom that these other smaller people visit.
Can you give some examples of like what are the if we're parsing out a classroom into what's the adult stuff and what's the kid facing stuff?
Think of how many classrooms we've been in, and just and listeners, think of classrooms you see where there is the big teacher desk, and it's in part of the room and it's like fortressed off. So there's like bookcases around it, or there's a bookcase in front of it, or there's some way to establish this is the grown-up space. And then think of, we have the big chair and the storage where I keep all of my books, all of my trade books, so I don't have to go down the hall to the book room later. And then all of the bins and the tubs and the plastic storage.
And what about the fridge?
I keep the things. I'm sorry?
And what about the fridge?
Oh, I haven't gotten to the lounge part yet.
Okay.
So that's just the utilitarian part. Then we get into the lounge part of the classroom where there is my floor lamps and my table lamps and my diffuser and my Christmas light or, mood lighting, my refrigerator, my microwave, my coffee maker, none of which I'm not making coffee for the second graders. It's just for me. I am not making something in the microwave for them. That's for my lean cuisine. I am not storing juice boxes in there. I'm storing you get the drift.
Sure.
So when you calculate here's my workspace, here's my lounge space, my kitchen, here's my storage area. In many classrooms, there's hardly any space for the kids, even though we go, well, look at all this room. There's 22 kids. There's hardly any space for them. And it's created inadvertently both this climate of this is my domain and you're just visiting, but it's also created some safety concerns.
Well, I would ask, the lamps and the diffusers and the special lighting, aren't those arguably for the purpose of students?
Well, certain social media sites might showcase those as being, that's what kids want, is they want to see a lot of lamps. They want to see a lot of table lamps, or it needs to set a mood.
So I don't know because I'm not an educator by training. Is there like a large body of research indicating that having all of that different lighting is critical for learning? Because like I know in interior design, it's considered like a best practice to have
Sure.
like layered lighting for different purposes. Does that also borne out in like the educational research?
Well, I think that's probably a mixed bag. I mean, clearly there's been for a long time, there's been research that indicates that pure institutional level lighting is not what we're looking for.
Okay.
And so when you're looking at a school in 1980, with a lot of fluorescent lighting, and you compare it to the type of lighting that you can put now with LEDs and different temperatures and, that kind of stuff, clearly there's better lighting available than what many schools may currently have.
Hmm.
But I think, unfortunately, we have gone from a strategic approach to it to much more of just if one lamp is good, 10 lamps is better,
Yeah.
as opposed to task lighting, that kind of stuff. But the reason that it's a problem from a safety thing, and I guess there's really two parallel discussions here. One is the aesthetic, academic learning enhancement discussion.
Hmm.
And then the other is the school safety, climate and culture concerns discussion.
Hmm.
So if we kind of parallel those two, the lighting, what we just were talking about, also puts an undue electrical load many times in
Hmm.
schools that are not appropriately wired because of their age, that can't handle that much electrical demand. And when these get left on and it's Friday and they're on all weekend, and it's a cost, it's definitely an extra cost to the school. When I was
We
talking
also.
about the personal kitchens, it's a similar electrical cost sort of thing.
Mhm.
Plus, there's also the health and safety concerns of food allergies and preparing food in a classroom, and the tipping, because the refrigerator is, the coffee pot is stacked on top of the refrigerator, and the tipping and the heat, and so there, every one of these has kind of a parallel potential safety problem as
Mhm.
well.
And we also tend to see when you talk about lamps or other extra things being plugged in that the classroom wasn't wired for those things being conveniently placed, and so we tend to see a lot more extra cords and extension cords and so on and so forth to get my lamp where I want it to be.
Yep. And then my bookcase, that is my fortress to keep those pesky kids from approaching my desk, is not anchored appropriately. So it's a potential tip hazard. Or the big bookcase that I'm putting as a divider to make a nook somewhere is just freestanding. So it's has the potential to trip, for a tripping hazard. And my cushy rug that's another trip hazard. So there's tipping and trip hazards associated with a lot of these aesthetic things as well. Again, not to say that, we want to go back to an 1890s school, with all the desks bolted to the floor in rows. That's not at all what we're saying. But I think I'm saying that it needs to be much more about what we're trying to do for the student experience, for the academics, because it's not your classroom, which is a very unpopular notion. It belongs to the public, to the school, to the organization.
Mhm.
And so I think one of the, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but one of the really good solutions that I've seen that I think really is kind of a way to have your cake and eat it too, is when there is a designated office space for teachers,
Mhm.
where you have a desk and you have the computer, you have the things that you need to work, and you'll see multiple teachers set up in one space where there's like, 5 or 6 or 7 different desks.
Mhm.
It encourages collaboration, but also it allows you to free up space in your classroom for that. And I understand lots of schools don't have that luxury, but with shrinking enrollments over time, it's possible that there might be those kind of spaces.
So in the absence of that sort of an opportunity, what else would you say, that teachers, so now that we've made everybody good and mad and we're asking you to sort of look at, is this, to what extent is this happening in my classroom or in my school? So then what else, if we can't do what you're, indicating in terms of having,
Right.
offices, so what else can
So
be
you
done?
take this measuring stick, and the measuring stick says, am I doing this because it's convenient for adults or because it's good for kids? So is it necessary to have all 30 sets of my trade books stored within reach? Is that convenient for adults or good for kids? Is that convenient for me to have the microwave, the air fryer, the all those things? Is that because it's good for kids, or is it because it's convenient for adults? And I think that really is a pretty good metric to challenge yourself to say, I'm taking up a lot of classroom space for my convenience instead of taking up classroom space for things that would enhance the educational experience and the educational progress of my students. And I think that's a little bit of a touchy, tough kind of thing, but I think it's a conversation that needs to be had, because ultimately my biggest safety concern with this whole discussion is rapid evacuation. When you have so much stuff in a classroom and everything is so crammed in because we're trying to store everything in a classroom, you really have created hazards that make it difficult to move kids quickly out of a room if they need to rapidly evacuate the classroom or the building. So there really is a very significant safety issue as well.
I think you had said something about sort of the strategy or the intentionality around how much we're filling the room up with stuff. And I think that's a really tricky thing to get calibrated, because you're right. We see many classrooms that are just packed to the gills with stuff, and they
Yep.
are cram packed with stuff that is the adults. Like, clearly this is this person's stuff, right? This is their style, this is their interest. And having some of that, I think, is critical, because we also on occasion see rooms that you're like, does anyone use this room? Because it's like empty. It's like
Yeah.
totally bare. There's empty desks, there's empty walls, and then you'll kind of walk and you'll go, oh yeah, there's a teacher's name here on the outside. And I think there's a cost to that too. There's a cost
Yeah,
to,
that's a great point,
there's a
because
cost
that
to,
continuum
yeah.
can be really damaging on either end. At one end, you have, this is my teacher's home, and I'm just dropping in for a bit because, I mean, we've seen where it looks like it's my house. It's everything I love, all my colors, all my this, all my that.
But like overstuffed so much so that I
Yeah.
can't even hear myself think in this
And then
room.
the other end is, like you said, does anyone
It looks
even,
like an institute, like I have been institutionalized. Like, it is, we can't have a single thing here because there would be, disaster. I mean, no decorations, no indication that people are even here ever. So I think to be able to calibrate those, to be, because there is a sweet spot in there,
yeah,
right? That this
yep.
feels like a welcoming, inviting place, but I'm not overwhelmed by so much clutter and stuff happening.
Well, and to take us full circle back to the beginning, this administrator that I talked about earlier talked about, it is not your classroom, your home. It is not a barren cell, but it's a learning laboratory. It is a learning space. And so it needs to be set up as a learning lab, as a learning space with what's conducive to learning, not what's conducive to my personal comfort, but what's conducive to the learning of students. And that's a little bit of an ouchy self-reflection point for some, I think, for people.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great point to leave it with. Of, have you thought about this? Is the level of stuff in your classroom, is it really what you have chosen, or is it where you've ended up because you've been in the same classroom for 10 years and you keep adding stuff and not taking away? And I realize I'm not able to stand in the place of authority regarding clutter, because you can see what's happening in my office behind me. But that notion of everything is here is because it's just kind of always been here, and I've never chosen the things that are still here. And so I
So
think
we're
that
looking
might
at
be a,
Swedish death cleaning for classrooms. Is that what we're saying?
well, I'm just saying, to make sure that you've chosen all of the stuff. Is the
Yeah.
stuff, because you know what? As you know, we talked about it being a little ouchy. Sometimes the stuff that's crammed in that classroom wasn't even yours.
The
You
stuff chose you. You
you
inherited it. That's a
sometimes,
wonderful
I
point.
mean, sometimes it's stuff that teachers inherited a
Yep.
mess, and they have not been able to free themselves of that. So,
Or they haven't felt empowered to do so
Sure,
because,
sure.
frankly, there is that. Well, the taxpayers bought that. We can
Right.
never get rid of it. Although
And
most of the time it's somebody's personal stuff. And so I think that's you raise a wonderful point to sort of end on, is that if this episode resonates with you as a teacher going, God, I wish I could get rid of that, then that needs to be a conversation that's had of how do we empower people to be able
Mhm.
to move away from some of that stuff.
Yeah. So if this resonates with you, or if you've been able to successfully craft a learning lab space that is welcoming and inviting and has some personal reflective touches, excellent. I think we should have people send us their photos. If you have a photo of your classroom that you
What,
feel
before
like
and after?
a before and after, or if
Oh,
you
yeah.
feel like I've nailed it, like I was able to that calibration of this is not Spartan and this is not so much that it's overwhelming. If you feel
Sure.
like you've nailed it and you want to share your photos with us, that we can share those with people who are trying to figure it out, please send those to us. Our email is info@eschoolsafety.org. You can head to our website for all sorts of resources, not just about climate and culture, but about all kinds of other safety concerns. The website is eschoolsafety.org. And if you have any questions, you can always reach out to us there. Do you have anything else to add?
Nope.
Then until next time, thanks so much, and we'll be back soon. Bye.